All that she wanted to do is sign me up to an investing website where I could put in $50 initially and build my investing account quickly to where I would be making $1,000 per day. She desperately wanted me to invest in this as she wanted me to benefit from it. The only problem was that I'd be walking into a pig butchering scam, and a blatantly obvious one at that. The website she shared with me was a Bitcoin investing website, which was the first red flag. Most, if not all, Bitcoin opportunities are scams, or at least highly dubious and risky to indulge in. But there was more. The About page on the site mentions two brothers who started the firm. No names or pictures were provided. On top of that, the hosting provider has a dubious reputation. Multiple scammers and spammers are under the same registrar as that website, among other things. And this is setting aside that the images don't load and multiple links send one back to the company homepage, and that the About page specifically mentions that one of these brothers is a brilliant web developer. Brilliant indeed. But what interested me more wasn't debunking this whole scam, but rather the conversation I had with this woman. Because she, unlike the brilliant web designer who can't upload images properly, played her role pretty spectacularly. She said she invests in real estate and rents out her properties where she charges exorbitant rates. When I proposed to her to lower the rent to make it more affordable, not only did she call it a philanthropic move, but she was asking me how would she be able to recover from her losses by choosing to charge less rent to her tenants. To me, I called the act being human, and whether she actually needed more money in the first place. The conversation didn't go much longer after that, but it was pretty clear to me that she was acting like she was from a different world than me. And while it's true that different people in different positions have different problems and think differently on how to handle these issues, the distinction between poor and middle class and the elites of the world has reached a point where the wealth gap and the way of thinking is wildly different. For many of us, we know the issue is late-stage capitalism running its natural course. But when it comes to the individuals themselves, these individuals are weird people. Weird in the way of their thinking. Weird in how they handle particular situations. Weird in general. And not in a good kind of way. To be clear, not every wealthy individual is like this. Some, like Dolly Parton, have charitable organizations doing genuine good for people, and she's using her influence and money towards some minor but helpful things. There were people like Dan Price who talked about the benefit of actually paying their employees their fair share. Even though Price said and made those big decisions just to get laid and slight his brother, it doesn't mean that the messaging itself is wrong or bad. There are a handful of examples of this sort of thing. But aside from those niche situations, the lives of the ultra wealthy are pretty weird, and they are weird for a good reason. As a result of them having too much money that they don't know what to do with it all. America is a prime example of the problems wealthy elites cause in their respective countries. With roughly 3,200 billionaires worldwide, the vast majority of them are concentrated in the United States. Even when we're not looking at billionaires, there's a great deal of wealth in America where there are hundreds of multimillionaires. It's important to bring that up because on top of late-stage capitalism causing this global wealth inequality that we're facing now, the elites of the world lead pretty weird lives. On one end, I get it. When you consider the stress that comes from being an A-list celebrity, it's easy for many celebrities to indulge in bad habits or to act in very different ways just because of so much pressure and stress that these people are going through. That in turn can form various bad behavior that we have seen over the years. We've seen plenty of happy celebrity couples end with messy, angry, and heated divorces. We've seen plenty of celebrities committing crimes or being abusive or straight up be bad people to others. Too much money isn't a means of forgiving or justifying their actions, mind you, but I do get it. And the reason all this happens simply boils down to how money affects our mental state. I know many gurus have talked a lot about developing a money mindset or to change your relationship with money. And I do agree to those sentiments, but only slightly. Because in the end, those same individuals spouting about how our relationship with money could be different isn't so different for them.
This'll make you talk. Talk! You're being too hard on the little guy.
They're set in their ways about what money is to them, and it's not about to change. And just like how they're not really improving themselves, their mentality around money hasn't changed much at all. And honestly, how they think about money isn't all that great. As righteous as it might sound for them to drop some sound financial advice on people that are struggling financially, their behavior and how money has affected them has caused a shift in their mentality without even realizing it. Working against money means understanding more about what our actual relationship with money is, where it's at, and how it's formed. And broadly speaking, while having some level of money doesn't change us much, having too much of it tends to make us more reserved and isolated individuals.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
What I mean by this is that money makes us think more about ourselves rather than the collective whole. Going back to the woman who wanted me to invest in a scam, she was more concerned about recovering her costs from doing a good deed and supporting her community than the act itself.
That's the neat thing. You don't.
Even if this woman was acting like a rich person and didn't have any wealth at all to her name, genuine rich people still behave in a similar manner. There were cases where people who bought homes near public beachfronts who have actively sued the town and won when they refused to take down gates and barricades that lead to those public spots, claiming that it was their property, even when the home they bought wasn't being used at all or that often. Not to mention, any time a rich person tries to do a good thing, it often ends up being more regressive. A prime example is Elon Musk, one of the wealthiest men in the world. Beyond building a very expensive and pointless tube, auto-driving cars that are safety hazards, sharp meme wagons, and rockets that can't launch properly, he's also launched a super PAC, where it's being investigated for data harvesting. Primarily because if you tell the site that you live in a political swing state, that PAC doesn't direct you to the registration site, despite it advertising that this ad is to help you get registered to vote in November for the presidential election. For a guy whose entire identity is to help humanity, Elon Musk is doing a terrible job at it.
Jeez.
In fact, he's making matters worse for us. A lot of billionaire charities often have them playing God rather than actually benefiting society or humanity as a whole, With a few exceptions, billionaire charities are simply another convenient opportunity to get a massive tax cut while manipulating people to think they're doing something actually beneficial to society.
King is a jerk.
Oh, good. That qualifies you for the calling the king a jerk tax.
In reality, a lot of billionaire philanthropy doesn't really do much. And if they're meant to combat big problems, it really takes a long time. For perspective, Jimmy Carter's charity took decades to tackle the guinea worm disease. But it required a lot of care and consideration, something that is lacking in the Gates Foundation and its goal to tackle hepatitis. All of this harkens back to some advice that you hear gurus use all the time. Make a point of surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals. At its core, it's the power of association at work. But it's the very same force that stunts one's perspective on things.
Ironic.
A lot of wealthy individuals are very isolated individuals. And even though the intended goal is to have a circle of rich friends, it doesn't exactly mean that you're well connected to the vast majority of people, let alone the general public. It doesn't exactly mean that you genuinely care about people. A lot of research has gone into money psychology, and one study found that those who make a lot of money are just bad tippers. While tipping itself is something I'm apprehensive about even now, the act of not tipping one of the most underappreciated and underpaid workers says something. All in all, people with money feel isolated because they instinctively believe that everyone wants them for their money rather than their personality. Over time, this narrative leads them to being around other rich people who share the same ideology. I get the overall sentiment when it comes to money and discussions around money, but when it comes to rich people in particular, they get these kinds of vibes even more, which leads them towards this more regressive and isolated mindset and creates this disparity that we're seeing between middle class and poor class and the elites. Ultimately, what I'm trying to get at here is that when people have a lot of money, there seems to be a regression in caring about those around you, even if you're saying that you are. Even the acts of generosity have a tinge of self-interest in them. Not that there's anything wrong with that in particular, since we all do things to get more money and improve our lives, and we leverage everything around us. But when it comes to rich people in particular, they do those things explicitly to deal with a problem that would otherwise stain their image. Not only that, but they would only indulge in things if they were the primary party benefiting from it. Dan Price branded himself as this wage and wealth equality evangelical, despite the fact he cut his wages down to $50K a year to hide the fact he was stealing money off the top prior to his brother talking to him about suing the company. Another example is the TV show Dragon's Den. There's an alternative version of this show in America called Shark Tank, but they're all generally the same. The goal is to convince wealthy investors to invest in the contestants' business. Oftentimes, the deals that are formed end up with these wealthy investors owning the vast majority of the business. If not, they try to negotiate with the business owner to give up a majority of their business. All in all, the wealthy wedge a gap between people, and it's not out of the question that they see humanity as a peasants versus lords sort of scenario. You don't see a lot of rich people hanging out with the regular average person. But even outside of that, this disconnection is obvious in the way they think modern society works. Daily tasks like grocery shopping, what usual people eat, among other things, are more foreign to them. I remember when Dr. Oz went into a grocery store and bought a salsa as a dip for a veggie tray as a political ad when he was running for the Senate. And there are plenty of other examples like that, such as Mark Zuckerberg spending billions of dollars on his metaverse idea. The metaverse has graphics that look like they're from a gaming console from the early 2000s. They can't even create legs for the avatars in that space.
Chicken! Look, I'll have your leg. Right!
Either Zucks got scammed in the most embarrassing way possible and doesn't want to admit that, or he genuinely believes that everyone is excited and they're gonna lose their mind over his dumb and expensive investment decision. It gets even worse. A memo was leaked out a while back where employees were expected to work and use the metaverse to do their job. Even though it was terrible and bland, it said something about a company owner forcing their employees to do something they really don't want to do. But this behavior is typical for the rich individual. After all, once a rich person gained enough wealth, they begin to extend their reach over to other realms to gain more power. You have billionaires buying up social media platforms and steering them towards a particular political viewpoint. If not that, then they're buying up newspapers and ensuring bad press never sees the light of day. There are several avenues one can take to spread their influence beyond media. Whether it's a charity organization, bribing government officials, or lobbying, all of them serve a means of forcing a particular viewpoint and things not moving forward. It leads to that bullying type of behavior and how it shapes individuals' minds. Trump has effectively created what the Republican Party is today, even though it was on the decline well before he ever threw in his hat in the ring. What I'm getting at here is that money is often used by the wealthy to build a specific narrative and to hide behind who they actually are. And it's so convincing that the rich individual believes in this persona they created to the point that anything that can shatter their reality causes emotional damage and stress to them.
Emotional damage!
Elon Musk believes that he's a beloved individual and that he's funny. But in the brief moments that he is exposed to the reality, he has a mental breakdown. I remember a piece done about him where he reportedly locked himself in his office for hours after he got booed off a stage when he made a public appearance at a comedy event. All of this mindset is eventually directed into an individual's actions. As the rich get richer, the more they have various issues that they must stomp out. While life is all about dealing with particular problems, financial ones are a very slippery slope. We all have a certain financial breaking point. It's a point in our life where we're making enough to live and have a happy life, and anything after that doesn't really provide us all that much.
What? What does that have to do with it?
No. He's got a point.
There was a particular study that looking into that breaking point and argued that money can buy you happiness, but only up to a certain point. After that, there wasn't any notable changes in one's behavior. However, going well past that creates those many examples and behaviors that I've presented so far. This compulsion to get more money is not so different from a particular TV show I heard about called Hoarders. It was a reality TV show that showed off people's unhealthy collection of various stuff. The idea of the show, I presume, was to tell the viewer that having too much of something leads to a disrupted lifestyle. But the same principle can apply to money. We've seen their kids turning out to be terrible people, deprived of any familial affection. That, or you have some that want nothing to do with you at all. If it's not kids, it's the relationships they have with other people around them. It's not uncommon for many to go through divorces, marry multiple times, or be single for extended periods of time. I get that relationships are very difficult to maintain and build, but looking at some of the behavior, there are obvious red flags that these celebrities and rich individuals have. This is on top of the various addictions that these people form. Beyond that, many CEOs just in general struggle with mental health and are more often depressed individuals. Looking at these things, it's this behavior and mentality that makes me believe that having more of something is not that great for you. It's to the point that rich people are often suffering in silence, and that this compulsion to maximize profit, skim money off the top, and do all kinds of terrible things is a result of a crumbling mind and more of a mental illness than anything else. But what's so dangerous about all of this is that we can develop all of these things too. And a prime example of this is a study that was conducted where two people played a game of Monopoly. Even though it's all fake money that we're dealing with in Monopoly, our attitudes around this board game isn't so different from how rich people act. In the study, one player was given a distinct advantage over the other. They got more money when they passed go, they had more starting cash than the other player, and they got to roll 2 dice. Meanwhile, the other player rolled a single die, had less starting cash, and received half as much when they passed go. The outcome was obvious, with the one with the advantage winning the game. But the study focused more on the behavior those players displayed over the course of the game. Ultimately, the one with the advantage became meaner to the losing player. They started to dive into the pretzel bowl that was in the room to measure compulsion, and they were more aggressive in how they moved their piece around the board. But the biggest remark from that study was when they asked the winning player how they won, they didn't mention anything about the coin flip that they won at the beginning of the game. Instead, they talked about their strategy and performance metrics as well as budgeting skills. They didn't mention that this entire opportunity fell on their lap because they won a 50-50 chance. All of this behavior isn't so different from someone who leads a wealthy lifestyle. For so many, they believe that fame and fortune is tucked away behind books, investment strategies, or a lucrative side hustle. And to an extent, they're right. But there is that privilege and all of these other advantages that are playing a major role in all of this that we, as common people, lack. After all, through that insane amount of privilege, they ended up where they are today, and they believe that it's possible for other people to get there too. That, or they believe that others are unworthy to be in their position, and we as a society have encouraged this kind of behavior. After all, they are so convincing and make us think they are who they say they are. So, really, what can we do about this? How can we grow as individuals knowing this stuff? Because the reality is, there's not really any kind of money mindset or financial philosophy that is going to help us if we ever end up with insane amount of money or start building up an incredible amount of wealth for ourselves. In the end, we're dealing with hoarders who think they are the best of humanity, when the reality is that many are actively destroying it in their own way. Genuine philanthropy can help in certain regards. However, many are in a position where they can't spend more than what is coming in. Another alternative for rich individuals is to pay heftier fines whenever they commit crimes. We've seen plenty of stories where multi-million-dollar businesses are fined tens of thousands of dollars for the things that they've done. It's a lot of money, but that's literally pocket change for these businesses. Alternatively, the whole tax the rich mentality also works, though this is easier said than done, of course. But for us as individuals, it's important for us to figure out how much money is enough for us to live our life that we want to be leading. For a lot of individuals, we don't need tens of millions or billions of dollars in order to live a very happy and financially secure life. In a lot of cases, it's tucking away $1 million in a retirement fund and living off the dividends and the interest that comes from those kinds of investments month after month and year after year. Beyond that, it's important for us to recognize that we shouldn't be rewarding wealthy individuals the treatment that they're currently enjoying, as well as the behavior that they're displaying, unless it's actually good and it's genuinely helpful, of course. But for a lot of rich individuals, that doesn't really happen all that often, admittedly. We should be looking more at the individual's character and their personality and determine whether we should be following or listening to these individuals or taking up tips from some random self-help guru who's like, hey, let's talk about how you can save up money just like Elon Musk does, or whatever. And if they are people that are genuinely struggling, then it's our duty to call them out on this and maybe encourage them to be seeking help. After all, too much money is more of a mental health problem, and seeing a therapist is something they can absolutely afford to do. And that is all I wanted to talk about. Thank you guys so much for listening to me rambling on about money and wealthy individuals. I would appreciate it if you would leave a like on this video before you go, and also to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. I talk a lot about self-help and sometimes get off onto these particular tangents about wealth management, but hey, either way, thank you guys so much for watching.